Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do our next educational video, which as you can see by the title, it is Plant Propagation, which is basically just growing plants, okay? That's basically all we're going to be talking about. Since I very much like growing plants from cuttings, from seed, or anything else like that, I thought it'd be a good time to talk about it. Especially since like we're in like the middle of the summer and I mean most plants have already started to grow by now. But you can still start doing cuttings. So this week's education video is on plant propagation. So what is plant propagation? So it's a process by which new plants grow from various sources. This can include seeds, cuttings, or other parts of the plants. Like some plants, you can possibly grow from root cuttings or trying to think of other parts. Stems, leaves, roots, just all those different stuff. You can grow a plant from about anything. It just might need some special treatment. So, plant propagation can refer to both man-made and then also natural processes. And then right here, I do have a picture over here. We have, it looks like a piece of basil that is rooting in a glass of water, which basil roots very easily. You can see all the little white hair roots there. And then in the picture here, I have a snake plant. Snake plants are a little bit more finicky. They take a little bit longer to root. But if you cut up the big long leaf up into sections, then you can stick it in the dirt and keep it a little bit moist, and it will eventually grow roots, and then a whole new plant. Might take a while. I've heard people say it takes months. I've never done it from a leaf cutting. So, first off, there is sexual propagation, which is seeds and spores that can be used for reproduction. So, plants make fruiting bodies, which then have seeds in them that get spread out by animals and stuff like that. So, a plant grown from seeds may be different, may have different characteristics from its parents because it's a combination of two parents. Some species produce seeds that require special conditions to germinate, such as cold treatment, smoke, or fire. Most seeds, well, most plants, guess, that grow in temperate climates that possibly will have like a winter time period where there's a lot of snow on the ground, and then also have a summer time period. That most of the plants will require cold to actually, I guess, germinate. Yeah. Then, like I said there, some are fire, which we'll talk about some that require fire because they're kind of special. Some plant species, include many trees, do not produce seeds until they reach maturity, which may take many years. So think like oak trees, hickory, I guess even peaches and pears and stuff like that, apples. They still take a couple years. Well, a few years to grow to the point where they produce fruit or seed. Seeds can be difficult to acquire, and some plants do not produce seed at all. So that's all the sexual propagation one. So basically, it's just seeds and spores. Then I did say we were going to talk about some plants that germinate through fire. So rebirth through fire. So some plants have adapted to thrive in environments where there are frequent forest fires or fires in general, using the heat and smoke to trigger germination and rejuvenation. So examples of these are the lodgepole pine, eucalyptus, giant sequoia, and mountain ash. Those are just a couple different examples. These trees are often fire resistant and then use the heat from the fire to release their seeds. Some cones, like the pines and stuff like that, their pine cones are sealed with resin that is melted with the heat of the fire and then releases seeds. Then the fire also clears out all the competition and leaves a nutrient-rich ash for the seedlings to grow in. So basically it burns up everything else, leaving tons and tons of space for the new plants to grow in. So it's a perfect time for them to grow. And if you look at the picture above me here, it is a picture, I think it's from Australia. It's for sure eucalyptus trees. But eucalyptus is special to the point that it has oils that are inside its bark and leaves, which all like also cause fires, and also cause the fires to heat up even more. And you might think that is bad for a eucalyptus tree, right? Well, you'd be wrong because eucalyptus, they can survive the forest fires, pretty hot ones. Because even though everything on the outside kind of burns up, like all the leaves, even the bark might be charred, there are still buds that are underneath the bark that they can grow up from. So as you can see in this picture here, this tree that has all like the bushy leaves and stuff like that growing from it is a eucalyptus tree that is sending out all those dormant buds to grow after a forest fire. And I think there's also some eucalyptus small ones planted at the base of it. So yeah, eucalyptus for sure is a god tier plant for any fire. So, asexual propagation, which is what we're going to be mostly talking about in this, I guess, video, is where you take plant roots, stems, or leaves that have a number of different mechanisms for asexual reproduction. So, plants are produced using material from a single parent. As such, there is no exchange of genetic material. Therefore, vegetative propagation, or asexual, always produces a plant that is identical to the parent. So if you take a stem off a basil plant, you stick it in a piece of water, or you stick it in the soil, it is going to be basically exactly the same as the parent, because it is just a piece of the parent. In some plants, seeds can be produced without fertilization, and the seeds contain only the genetic material of a parent plant. Therefore, propagation via asexual seeds is asexual reproduction, but not vegetative propagation. So, like I said there are plants that can self-fertilize, and that means that they're fertilizing themselves, and that means that that's technically still asexual. So there are seeds that are asexual propagation. So, one of the, I guess, main ways that like big farms and stuff like that grow house plants and stuff like that grow plants is through tissue cultures or plant tissue cultures. So as you can see in the picture up above me here, there is a test tube which has some sort of medium in the very bottom, like agar or something like that. And you can see the roots are growing into it. And then they grow a plant in a test tube. And then when the plant gets big enough, they can take it out. But anyways, tissue culturing is also called micropropagation. And it's a collection of techniques used to maintain or grow plant cells, tissues, or organs under sterile conditions on a nutrient culture medium, and also known as composition. The advantage to this is the production of exact copies of plants that produce a particularly good flower, fruit, or other desirable trait. So let's say you have a strawberry plant or something like that, okay? And this strawberry plant produces very, like a lot of different fruits, and then also the fruits taste very good. So you could try to plant some of the seeds from the strawberry plant, but it's not going to be exactly the same as the parent. So you could, I guess, wait for a runner to come up, and the runners should be exact copies also. Or you could take a piece of leaf, put it into one of these test tubes or whatever in sterile conditions, and with the right amount of hormones and stuff like that, you can grow a plant from just a piece of a leaf. Now you see, I've never done tissue culturing. I really do want to try, but it seems to be, it has to be under sterile conditions, and it seems very particular. Plus I don't have all the stuff that it needs to grow them. So eventually I'd like to try doing it, but I haven't had to try yet. It produces exact copies of parent plant. To quickly produce mature plants, they grow a lot faster. And then to produce a large number of plants in a reduced space. So like if you grow these plants in a test tube, you can have like 100,000 test tubes in just like a small area compared to 100,000 potted plants. The production of plants in a sterile container allows them to be moved with greater reduced chance of transmitting diseases, pests, and pathogens. So they're in sterile conditions. You're not going to have to mess with pests like the Japanese beetle that we talked about last month. The production of plants from seeds that otherwise have very low chances of germinating and growing. So orchids are one of the plants that are kind of finicky to grow from seed, whereas if you grew them in a sterile environment, the chances of them growing to a maturity is highly increased. the storage of genetic plant material to safeguard native plant species. So it's kind of like, imagine a zoo, okay? So a zoo can be considered like a safeguarding place for different animal species. So keeping a small population of an animal just in case something happens to the native population. So let's say there's a plant. Here in the United States, we talked about, well, actually, milkweed's in different places. But anyways, milkweed is one of those that is a large abundance in the United States, and it's important for monarchs. So pretend that, like, let's say all the milkweed in the environment died or something like that due to some sort of disease or something like that. Then if they had some seeds stored up or even some plants that were in a sterile environment, if all of them died in the real world, like the outside world, the wild, then they could still plant some more. There's still some that they could put out there. So a little bit more about tissue culturing, going a little bit more in depth. So plant tissue culture relies on the fact that many plant parts have the ability to regenerate into a whole plant. So single cells, plant cells without cell walls, pieces of leaves, stems, or roots can often be used to regenerate a whole new plant if it's put on a culture medium and given the required nutrients and plant hormones. So that's why I said that, like, if you wanted to grow a certain strawberry plant and you did not have any other ones and you didn't want to grow them from seed, then you could just take a piece of the leaf, put it on the media, and then give it the right hormones and nutrients, and then you can grow a whole new plant just from that leaf. And then I have some more pictures of different plants that are inside some sort of sterile plastic container with an, looks like, agar medium. So the preparation of the plant tissue for the tissue culture is performed under sterile conditions, like we said. The tissue is grown in a sterile container, such as a petri dish, a flask, a test tube kind of thing. And then inside a growth room with a controlled temperature and light intensity. Living plant material from the environment are naturally contaminated on the surface with microorganisms, so to keep it sterile, they use a chemical solution, usually alcohol, sodium, or calcium hypochlorite, to disinfect them, to kill anything that's on the outside. Then the sterile plant are then placed on the surface of the sterile solid culture medium, but are sometimes placed directly into the sterile liquid medium. So it's placed on the medium. That's all that matters, okay? It doesn't really matter if it's a liquid or solid. It's just a different medium, a media. So what is this medium that we're talking about in the tissue culture, in the test tube, that the plant grows in? So it can be either solid or liquid, like we talked about before, and it's generally composed of inorganic salts, plus a few organic nutrients, vitamins, and plant hormones. So the two plant hormones that are used most of the time is auxin and cytokinin, which auxin will often result in a proliferation of roots, growing more roots, and cytokinin will yield shoots, so stems and stuff like that. So they'll use different combinations, a balance of these, to produce an unorganized growth of cells or calluses. And then they can take pieces of the shoots or roots to produce plantlets, which, when mature, can be transferred to a potting soil for further growth in a greenhouse as normal plants. So they don't stay in those plastic containers forever, the petri dishes. So I just want to go over just a little bit exactly what I mean by, like, slicing off pieces to grow them. So they don't, like I said, they don't stay inside the petri dish forever. And that plant that they're growing in the petri dish is not what's going to be technically potted. It could, I guess. But they usually will cut off a shoot or cut off a piece of root from that cultured plant, and then they'll move it to a potting soil to grow it in a greenhouse, like I said there. So they're just taking pieces of that cultured plant to grow. So now that we are done with tissue culturing, which that is just kind of a generalized tissue culturing idea. It's not, doesn't go too far in depth, but it gives you a general idea. So next, I want to talk about grafting, which grafting is a big thing in plants. So grafting is a horticultural technique whereby tissues of a plant are joined so that they can continue to grow together. So I have a picture here up above that shows different grafting techniques. And basically all it is cutting a piece of plant and then connecting them together with some sort of either rope or tape or some sort of something to keep them together. And the upper part of the combined plant is called the cycon, while the lower part is called the rootstock. And the success of this joining requires that the vascular tissue grows together, and in most cases, the stalk or rootstock is selected for its roots, and the cycon is selected for its stems, leaves, fruits, or flowers. So here you can see up above that this one here, they just kind of cut the side of the stem on both plants, and then they stick them together and they tie them together. That's one different way. Two, you can see that they kind of cut further into the plant, and they don't cut off the piece of stem, but they connect them, like interweave them kind of thing, and then they stay together like that, and they'll grow together. Then those are where, like, I guess you keep both the plants together alive. Whereas 3, 4, and 5 is you're taking a piece of the plant and sticking it into another plant. So 3 is a very nice graft where the stems line up perfectly. You just stick them together, put a piece of tape around them, and they'll stick together and grow together. 4, you cut like a notch into the plant and then stick the cycon into the rootstock, and then they'll grow together. And then if you don't want to cut like the whole top of the other plant off, you can just put it in like a branch or something like that. Like make a notch in the side of the stem and then stick a branch in, a piece of the plant. And like we said here, kind of like if you're going to do tissue culturing, keeping a plant, like, because you want the plant to have certain characteristics. If you do this, if you take a branch from, let's say, an apple tree, like a really good apple that you like, and then there's an apple tree that doesn't really produce very good apples, you can kind of cut the tree that does not have very good apples, like cut it down, and then you can stick a branch or a piece of the tree of the good apples into that, and then you can grow a new tree that grows good apples. So there are many different grafting techniques, kind of like I showed on the last one, but I wanted to show a few more pictures of actual plants that have got this done, and not just a picture of random branches. So there's also bud grafting, which a bud is just, I guess, the starts of a branch, or possibly could be a flower or something like that from another plant. So a bud is removed from the parent plant, and the base of the bud is inserted beneath the bark of the stem of the stock plant, from which the rest of the shoot has been cut. So you can see the picture here that you can see the bud being put into the bark of the plant, and it'll grow probably into a branch that will be totally different than the rootstock plant. Then, if we move myself over a little bit, we have a cleft grafting, which is a small cut is made in the stalk or the rootstock, and then the pointed end of the cycon is inserted into the stalk. So this is one like I was talking about the apple tree. So if you completely cut down the apple tree, and then you stuck a branch from another tree into that, then the roots will keep that branch alive, and then it'll start producing different apples. Then we have whip grafting, which is this picture right here to my side. The cycon and the rootstock are cut slant and then joined. So this is a really nice, it doesn't look as much because there's a little bit of like scar tissue from the connection, but the stems match up pretty well. And now that branch will start growing into a different plant than the original. So grafting continued. Both tissues must be kept alive until the graft has taken, usually a period of a few weeks. So if the branch that you put on does not take and it dies, of course it's not going to grow into a new plant. The advantages of grafting are that grafting of a mature cycon onto a rootstock can result in fruiting in a little as 2 years. So if you take a mature apple branch and put it onto a kind of juvenile apple tree kind of thing, I know I keep going back to apples, but I like apples, then it can cause the plant to start producing fruit much earlier than like growing a plant for like 6 years or something like that. The ease of propagation of cuttings the cuttings of an easily rooted plant are used to provide rootstock for hard to propagate plants. So that is where I guess if there's a certain type of plant that grows very fast, then they could use that as a rootstock, and then they can put something hard to propagate, like a harder variety, on top of it. You can graft it on. The hardiness, because the cycons has weak roots, or the roots of the stock plant are tolerant to difficult conditions. So if a plant is more drought tolerant or more frost tolerant, those would be great to have for roots. And then you could have something that's a little less tolerant, like drought tolerant, on top. Disease and pest resistance, kind of exactly the same thing. It just protects it from diseases or pests. Pollen source. So limbs of crab apples have been grafted at regular spaces onto trees to help pollinate different branches. Repair. To repair damage to the trunk of a tree that can prohibit nutrient flow, such as stripping of bark by rodent or completely girdled the trunks. So I didn't put anything about girdling on here, but I do want to mention that girdling is basically if you went around the tree. Yeah, okay, you guys have probably seen beavers, okay? You know how beavers go around the trunk of a tree and, like, chew around the whole side, like, all around the tree? So if you are to cut all around the bottom of the tree, then you will kill the tree, because that's called girdling. Now, there is a way that you can graft called a bridge graft to keep the tree alive. So you could take a piece of branch or a piece of the bark, I guess, and you can put it on the girdled part and connect the top half of the tree with the bottom half of the tree, like the roots, the rootstock to the cycon, with that bridge graft, and then you can keep the tree alive. I've seen people do it. I've never tried it. So, I mean, I know it works. But, changing of cultivators. So, to change the cultivator in a fruit orchard, it's more profitable to what's called top working, which you basically cut the whole top of the tree off and then you graft another different fruit tree onto it. So, like, if, let's say you don't like Red Delicious apples, which I don't like Red Delicious that much. So if you had an apple orchard and you had all Red Delicious trees, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I don't like Red Delicious anymore. I want to do, let's say, Honey Crisp or something like that. Then I guess you could just cut the branches off of the Red Delicious and you could graft on Honey Crisp, yeah. Honey Crisp branches onto that tree, which it'll take a little while for them to grow. But then you don't have to start out from the beginning. You don't have to grow the whole, I guess, tree itself. Like the roots will still be there, the trunk will still be there. You just were putting new branches onto the tree. So that's kind of an interesting thing to do. So that helps instead of replanting a whole orchard. So grafting has some different curiosities, okay? So what I mean by curiosities is grafting different plants onto other plants. So grafting related potatoes and tomatoes, so both produce at the same time. So we'll go over that one in particular, because that one's an interesting one to me. So you can graft a tomato plant onto a potato plant, and they'll grow. Cacti of wide different forms are sometimes grafted onto each other. So if you look at the picture up here, you can see, I think it's a moon cactus that produces like the different colored tops. So this is not one cactus. These are two cactuses that are put together. And then we have these cactuses here where you can see that the cactus is kind of cut in half, and then smaller ones are put inside of it, and they callus over, and then they continue to grow. Multiple cultivators of fruits such as apples are sometimes grafted on a single tree. This is called a family tree, which provides more fruit variety. So, I've actually had one of these apple trees before. So, there are apple trees you can buy, like this, the family tree, Whereas instead of getting just like Honeycrisp or Red Delicious, you can get Honeycrisp and Red Delicious on one tree kind of thing. Like, it just different varieties. It doesn't have to be those two varieties. But you can have a tree that will produce different varieties of apple, which is pretty cool. The only downside to this is if the branch breaks or something like that, then if the branch breaks off that has Red Delicious, you're not going to get any more Red Delicious apples. So that's the only downside to that. Tree shaping uses the grafting technique to join separate trees or parts of the same tree onto itself. I've seen people make fences out of willow trees because willow trees grow very easily. Their branches, if you just stick the branches in the ground, they will root. And I've seen them like weave them into fences, which looks pretty cool. A living fence. So, I mentioned the unholy tomato potato hybrid, which I hate to say unholy because it actually is pretty cool. I did not think this thing actually existed. I had seen videos on Facebook of this, and it looked fake. I was like, there is no way that this is actually true. But it is real. I had to look more into it because like I kept seeing it on Facebook, and I'm like, that's not real. That's not real. And then I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, it is real. So there are two different names, and the two different names are just a combination of potato and tomato. So there's a pomato, and then there's also a tom tato, yeah. Um, but it is a grafted plant that is produced by grafting together a tomato plant on top and a potato plant on bottom, which both are members of the same genus and are both members of the nightshade family. So that's the reason why, like, they can be grafted together. You can't just graft two random plants together. I guess I should have said that ahead of time. So you can't like graft a tomato plant onto an apple tree or something like that. I don't think you could, at least. It doesn't make sense if it would. But if they're closely related, there's a good possibility they can be grafted together. So anyways, the tomato will grow on the vine while potatoes will grow in the soil from the same plant. So this makes food production more efficient as they maximize the number of crops that can be produced on a single piece of land. And then the grafting can improve resistance to bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and also attracts a more diverse group of pollinators. So this, I don't know how well the pomato works, but I will agree that it does decrease the amount of space you need on a piece of land. So instead of having like, oh, we'll grow an acre of potatoes and then like, I don't know, a couple handfuls of tomato plants. Now you can be like, oh, we're just going to grow a ton of pomatoes. Which pomatoes cannot be grown from seed, okay? That's one thing. They have to be grafted, so you have to specifically make each plant. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I wouldn't mind trying it. I think they use cherry tomatoes and white potatoes on the picture I have up top here. But I don't have any potatoes growing this year. So maybe one year I'll just grow one potato and then I'll grab a vine from a tomato plant and I'll try to put them together because it sounds too cool not to do. So another grafting curiosity are multi-fruit trees, which I talked about like the family trees. So they are combo trees that produce multiple varieties of a certain type of fruit. So example are like kind of like the family tree that has like, let's say like Honeycrisp and Red Delicious apples and stuff on it. So apple trees, cherry trees, pear trees, plum trees. I'm sure there's plenty of different tree types that you could like combo them. But it's pretty cool that you can get multiple different varieties of fruit from one tree. Then there are mixed fruit trees that produce different types of fruit on one plant. So two of the examples I have here are plum apricot trees, which produce both plums and apricots, and then there's the peach and nectarine trees, which produce peach and nectarines. I'm sure there are plenty of different multi-fruit trees. I heard somewhere that someone had made a tree that had 40, I think 40 different types of fruits, which I don't know for sure if that was different varieties of a certain like apple or something like that, or if it was actually 40 different fruits, which 40 different fruits would be insane to have on one tree. It'd be a huge tree. But yeah, so that is something that's pretty cool that you can only do from grafting. Again, these plants, these combo trees, can only be made through grafting. They cannot be grown from seed. You can't have a seed for a mixed fruit tree. So, after we're done with grafting, we're completely done with the grafting now, okay? Now we're going to talk about layering. So layering is a different way that you can grow a plant. So it's a technique when the stem or a branch of a plant is manipulated to promote root development while it's still attached to the parent plant. So once the roots are established, the new plant can be detached from the parent plant. So if you look at the picture here above me, you can see that there's a tree. I assume that's a tree at least. And they took the branch and they stuck it in the ground. They staked it down, and then they stuck the branch, like part of the branch is in the ground, part of it is out of the ground. And at that point that it's in the ground, it will start producing roots. And then after the roots are formed, you can just cut the branch off and you have a new tree. Layering is more complicated than taking cuttings, but it has the advantage that the propagated portion of the tree or plant continues to receive water and nutrients from the parent plant while it's still forming roots. So this is kind of like the point where grafting, like when you graft a tree on, it'll keep the branch alive. This one, the branch is still attached to the plant, still getting nutrients, so it can produce roots without having to worry about anything. In-ground layering, or simple layering, the stem is bent down and the target region is buried in the soil, kind of like the picture here. This is ground layering or simple layering. Now, there is air layering, which I've tried this with not too great results, but I didn't try very hard. It was one of those things that I had a plant that I knew I could, and I stuck a bag of soil on it and kind of kept it moist. It didn't take, but I didn't try too hard. So air layering does not involve burying the stem. So ring air layering is where the exposed wound is covered in a growth media, such as sphagnum moss or soil of some sort, and then after a period of time, the stem is separated from the original plant. So it will grow roots inside that ball of sphagnum or soil. And then you can just disconnect it and plant it wherever you want. Tourniquet air layering has a similar method to air layering, except that instead of creating a wound, a wire is wrapped around the stem and the ends are twisted until it is very tight. So, same exact thing, except you basically slowly cut off the plant from the tree. Or I guess the cutting. So, root hormone is often applied to the wound to encourage root growth. I haven't really mentioned rooting hormone, but rooting hormone is always a safe bet when you're trying to do, like, not grafting, you don't need it for grafting, but if you're trying to grow roots, then rooting hormone is always a good thing. I've used rooting hormone for cuttings and stuff like that, which we'll go over cuttings later. But yeah, you can put rooting hormone on the wound to encourage root growth to make it maybe go a little bit faster. And you can see the pictures up here. So this is kind of like the wound in the tree, and then you put the sphagnum moss or soil over it, and then you tie the bag, and you just leave it there till it grows roots. So, done with layering now. So now there's another way you can do it, which is called division, which division is very similar to certain types that I'm going to talk about later. But division is basically just a method of asexual plant propagation where the plant is broken into two or more parts, and each part has an intact root and crown or stem, and has long been used to propagate bulbs such as garlic and saffron. Yeah, saffron. So this is a picture of basically what you're doing. Most plants that have bulbs will usually grow more bulbs. So think of this kind of like a potato plant, okay? Like a potato, or maybe think of like, I'm trying to think of other bulb plants, like tulips. Tulips are bulbs, I'm pretty sure. So if you dig up a tulip or a potato plant, potatoes in general, yes, then you can see that there are different potatoes down there. You can divide those or separate them, and you could plant those potatoes to produce more plants. That would technically be division. As long as I guess the potato had a stem of its own. If it didn't have a stem of its own, I guess it wouldn't technically be considered division. I don't know. But yeah, basically you dig up a plant and it has like some sort of bulbs or something like that, or even if it has its own root system, you could divide it up to grow a new plant. So this offsets, or sometimes called pups, is pretty dang cool because some plants will grow offsets. Like you see the pictures down here. So right behind me, I have an aloe vera plant, which if you look right next to me here, this aloe vera plant is growing some pups, some extra aloe vera plants from its root system. So these could be disconnected from the main plant and still grow because they have their own root system, they have their own stem. This would technically kind of be considered division, I guess. Offsets and pups is a small, virtually complete daughter plant that has been naturally and asexually produced on the mother plant. And they are clones, meaning that they are genetically identical to the mother. So the aloe vera plant, every single one of those pups is going to be exactly the same as that one. Then in the center here, I have a pregnant onion, which is an onion. And if you see these little, like, kind of like pimple things on its side, I don't know how to say it, like little dots on its side, those are technically baby onions. If you picked those off and planted them, they would grow into another pregnant onion. Then on the very far side over here, we have a banana plant, which banana plants will, kind of like the aloe vera, will grow different pups or offsets from the roots and produce more plants. So you could go ahead and divide or do a division on that banana plant to produce more trees. This is one of my favorite types, okay, is pups, because you know that the plant is already growing. You know it's got its own roots, its own stem, it is doing great, okay? It's not like cuttings where you're cutting off a piece of the plant that has no roots and might not survive. So, one of my favorite plants, okay, is a spider plant. Spider plants, super easy to grow. They grow really big, and they are really hard to kill. And then they produce tons and tons of offsets, okay? Tons of different pups. So it's native to Africa, and it's easy to grow as a houseplant because of its resilience, but it can be sensitive to fluoride in the tap water, which commonly gives it burned tips. So at the very end of... Ooh, actually, in this picture up above, me, you can see at the very tip of this leaf here, you can see a little burned edge. That could possibly be because of fluoride, but it could also be because the leaf is starting to die. Flowers are produced in a long branched on a long branch, which can reach a length of up to 75 centimeters or 30 inches long. That is not an exaggeration. And eventually they will bend down to meet the earth. So here, this picture right here, you can see a flower. And then also from the flower, you can see a pup growing right next to it. So this is how the plant will reproduce. It can still produce seed, I'm pretty sure. But they usually produce with pups. And the flowers are actually pretty cool. And they flower all year round. Mine, I think last year, mine was putting off flowers and pups around wintertime. And the length of the... Oh, yeah. If you also look at this picture here with the one with the burned tips, you can see the different branches that are going down. And these are all little pups down here that are growing at the edge of the branches. So those branches can grow very, very long. I was actually going through my plants, and I was like, okay, we need to move you guys around. And my spider plants took the longest time because, like, one of my plants, well, actually, all of them had like 2 or 3 branches growing off, and they had like 5, 6 pups each. So they reproduce very, very, very fast. And then also, behind me here, you can see the root system for them. So they have fleshy, tuberous roots, each about 5 to 10 centimeters long, or 2 to 4 inches long. And they collect water a lot. They love water. My spider plants actually do end up growing into the tray I have underneath them where the water drains. They grow into the tray, And if I have to ever repot that spider plant, I'm going to have to cut off some of its roots because they are impossible to get out of that tray. But yeah, they kind of look weird. The first time I repotted my spider plant, I was like, what the heck is this? Is this a different plant? Is it a worm or some sort? And then I'm like, oh wait, they are connected to the plant. I'm like, that is its roots. So pretty neat plant. And since they grow really fast, they are really, really good at cleaning the air. Because whenever a plant grows, it takes CO2 out of the air, and then the CO2, the carbon, is used to grow the plant. You know the drill, okay? Kind of similar to pups or offsets, or I guess, no, probably pups or offsets. Stolons or runners are a point of a plant where a horizontal connection between parts of an organism are made, whereas the plant stem, which grows at the soil surface or just below the ground, to form roots at the nodes, and then the new plant from the buds. So that is not a really great explanation for it, so I will do my best to kind of explain it. But the example I have down here is a strawberry plant, and you can see, if you look over here on the strawberry plant, this is the mother plant on the very far side. And it makes a stem. And this stem you can see right here, you can follow it from this plant over to the next plant, over to the next plant, over to the next plant that's behind me. That's what you call a runner. And it is a horizontal connection between parts of an organism because technically these are all the same organism right now because they are connected. But each one of these runners, these little strawberry plants, have their own root system at this point. So you could cut the stem between each one of these, and then they will grow into their own plant. So that is pretty cool. That is also why I have so many strawberry plants at my house, and I am trying to find people to take them. Then there are storage organs, which storage organs I'm sure everyone is kind of familiar with. So it's a part of a plant specifically modified to store energy and water. The storage organ often grows underground, where they are better protected from herbivores. These are used by plants to survive adverse conditions, such as cold, excessive heat, lack of light, or drought. So it's basically a little food storage area. So if there's like a really hot summer or a really, really long drought, then they can survive much longer than any of their other plants around. So some storage organs, you can be like the storage taproot of a carrot. The carrot, the orange part, is technically a large taproot. Then a bulb of an onion. That's one I should have mentioned when we were talking about divisions. Onions, okay? Onions can be divided. So that is a storage organ. A rhizome, kind of like ginger. I think this is a ginger root. I think, a rhizome. And then stem tubulars of potatoes. Potatoes are technically a storage organ. So yeah, you can just cut off any of these potatoes or bulbs or separate them, and they can grow their own plant. So now we are on to my second favorite way to grow plants. Because I said offsets and pups were kind of my top favorite. Divisions are kind of up there too. Cuttings are my next favorite because it opens up the whole world to tons and tons of different plants that you can grow. So cuttings or a plant cutting is a piece of plant that is used to asexually propagate a plant. So a plant node is a crucial part of a plant stem where buds, leaves, and branching twigs originate. So whenever you cut a plant, get a cutting, you have to make sure that you get a plant node. I didn't have this in the slides originally, but then I'm like, that is actually a very, very, very important part because unless you are doing tissue culturing, if you don't have a node, you're not going to get a plant. So whenever you cut a plant, like I have a picture of a wandering Jew right here. If you have, like, these are the cuttings up above me here. If you see this white picture here with the different ones, anywhere where you see a leaf coming out, there is a node there. Or if you see a branch coming out of another branch, that is a node also. If you have one of those areas on a plant, you can grow the plant. So Cutting is a piece of stem or root of the source plant which is placed in a suitable medium such as moist soil or sometimes just water. Kind of like this wandering Jew cutting right up here. They are in just jars of water and doing perfectly fine. The plant piece will begin to grow as a new plant independent of the parent. And sometimes a rooting hormone may be administered to encourage growth and can increase the success rate. I started using rooting hormone, but it's really not needed for most plants. Some plants that are a little harder to grow, you might need them. But like wandering Jews, I've done teddy bear vine, I've done monstera cuttings, tons of different cuttings. I've never actually needed to use rooting hormone. I've done it without it. It might increase the success rate, maybe, but it's not absolutely needed. And there are several advantages to cuttings, mainly that the produced offspring are practically clones of the parent plant. Kind of like if you were to take a division or a pup or something like that, they are clones. So, since we were just talking about Wandering Jew, Wandering Jew is one of the hardest plants I've known, and they survive basically every different thing I've done with them. So anyways, wandering Jews are also known as small leaf spiderwort, river spiderwort, inch plant, speedy Henry, or wandering Willie. So they have a lot of different names. I've always called it wandering Jew. I've always heard it called wandering Jew. Or inch plant. I've heard inch plant a little bit. But anyways, it's the fleshy stems root at any node that is on the surface. Kind of like we said before, that when you make a cutting, you want to make sure you have a node. And these are a very viney plant. So they will grow very, very long. And as long as a node touches some soil or water, it will grow roots there, and you could cut off the stem at that point, and you could grow a whole new plant. It requires moist soil to do well, but is slowed in cold climates. And it tolerates heavy shade. That's another good thing. If you have like a window that doesn't have a lot of sunlight, you could probably still grow a wandering Jew there. The wandering Jew may not grow huge. I have a couple of them in my room, and they're kind of small. And then I have a whole bunch of them in my small greenhouse outside, and they grow huge. Like if they get enough sunlight and they get enough water and they have enough space, they will grow huge. But one thing is that it's toxic to dogs, cats, and horses, so you have to keep it away from your pets. And then also, it is one that it has to be in a warm climate. Like, it can tolerate cold, but if it snows or frosts or stuff like that, it'll die. So this is not an outside plant. This is definitely a house plant that you could put outside in the summer, and in the winter, you have to bring it inside. So that is basically all I have for, I guess, plant propagation. That was already a long one. I tried to ad-lib quite a bit of stuff there. And I mean, I didn't talk about a ton of different plants. Oh, I forgot to talk about, what are they called? Succulents, okay? I forgot to talk about different succulents. So like jade plants, okay? Uh, Different succulents like jade plants can be grown from even a leaf. Because the leaf is, I would consider, a storage organ. So a jade plant you can grow from a cutting, so you could cut a piece off it, which I've seen like 40-year-old jade plants. Like I've seen jade plants that are huge. But jade plants you can cut off a whole like chunk of the, I guess, trunk or branch or something like that. You can stick it in soil, and it will grow into a new plant. It's the same thing if a leaf falls off the jade plant. If a leaf falls off it, then if the leaf hits soil, it could grow into a new plant. I actually had, I'm not great at growing jade plants. They don't like me that well. I think I care too much and I water them too much. I try to let them dry out. But I do have one jade leaf that has slowly been growing over the course of it's probably been 2 years now. Well, actually, it's been longer than that. It's been a while. But it's still very small. But jade plants can be grown from just a leaf an entire leaf, as long as it's an entire leaf. Succulents, if you like, let's say like, there's times where I will bump into my succulents and like a leaf will fall off or a branch will fall off, and I just stick it back in the soil and grow a new plant. They are very, very easy to grow. Because yeah, at the very end of the leaf, like the point where it breaks, it will grow roots there, and then you can grow a new plant. Uh, but yeah, I just really enjoy. I really enjoy growing plants. I have way too many plants, and I've been trying to find people to take them, or I need more space. Because every single time I repot my aloe vera plants, they make 4 or 5 more babies, more pups, and then I'm like, well, I don't have anywhere to put you, so you just stay with your parent. But I'm hoping I don't have my greenhouse up yet. Okay, I got a greenhouse bought. It's a 10 by 12. It's one of those Harbor Freight greenhouses. So I'm hoping I can get it put up, and then I can start moving plants outside, and then I can have a lot more space to grow a lot more plants. Like tons more spider plants, tons more aloe veras. I can grow more of my teddy bear vine, which is one of my favorite plants. Um, but yeah, so I hope this kind of gives you an idea and of like different ways you can grow plants. The big ones are offsets, um, like offsets and pups. I guess runners for strawberries. Cuttings are a big one, and divisions are a big one also. Grafting is one that I'm still scared about doing on plants I care about. At some point, I might get to the point where I might try to graft, but I don't know for sure if I want to try it. But yeah, I hope you guys learned quite a bit about plants here. If you do have any trouble keeping plants alive or something like that, if you want to, you can put in the comments or something like that. I can try to give a little bit of insight into probably what it is. But usually if you're having trouble keeping a plant alive, it usually comes down to it's too wet or it's too dry. So like if you don't water it enough, then it can die. And if you water it too much or it sits in water, then it can die. So the main thing is to remember to make sure your plant dries out completely or kind of dries out completely. Like I think someone said like the 2 inches of soil on top. You want to make sure that the top 2 inches are dry and then you can water the plant. Just make sure it's not sitting in water. And that's like one of the main ways to keep it alive. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I'm so glad I could finally do this. I should have probably made videos of me potting plants, but like I've already done most of my potting for this year. So maybe possibly in the future. Possibly in the future when I have my greenhouse built, I might have to record me potting plants out there when I have more space and I can show a video of different ways to do it. Because I could divide up my pregnant onion, do a division, and also I could try to divide up my aloe vera plants. I could do cuttings of wandering Jews or teddy bear vines or monsteras, stuff like that. So yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed that educational video for this month. Haven't quite decided what we're going to do for next month. This one actually ended up a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but I started blabbing about plants, which I do enjoy doing. So I will see you guys next month for the next educational video. So, bye-bye.